Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back to Atari ST A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari ST games, some which I grew up with and some which are new to me. Today is one of the former. Today we're looking at Xybots, which was a 1987 third-person shooter by Atari Games, first released in the arcade. And it combines 3D maze exploration with shoot 'em up action, and it's kind of like a 3D gauntlet. In fact, it was originally intended to be a 3D gauntlet, so developer Ed Logg was originally up for making this into a game called Gauntlet 3 Catacombs, but Atari Games marketing decided not to allow him to do that for some reason. So instead, he and his co-creator Doug Snyder decided to create something that was effectively a spin-off from Major Havoc that was a few years earlier. So we've seen that on the Atari A to Z flashback series. And so the idea that Logg and Snyder had when they were first creating this game was that they wanted to create a first-person game that didn't require any specialised hardware, but they found this pretty challenging for a number of reasons. First of all, they found it quite difficult to build an intuitive control scheme because this was 1987. We hadn't yet established good methods of control for three-dimensional stuff. So although there were three-dimensional games around at the time, we hadn't really sort of agreed on a good way of controlling things as we have done today. So it wasn't until I think Quake was the first time that sort of mouse and keyboard controls became widespread, and then there were various console games that established the twin stick formula that we use if we're using a gamepad. So Logg found building the controls to fit the game particularly challenging, and he also found it tricky to encourage players to actually turn around corners. So he found when testing that a lot of people just assumed that you just walk into the screen and that you weren't able to turn. So he found it quite challenging to encourage people to do that. And he was so anxious about this that he was actually quite concerned that the game wouldn't get a widespread mass production, that it wouldn't enter arcades at all in the first place. As it happens, it did enter arcades, but it didn't do very well for one reason or another. Looking back on it in, I think it was about 2005, 2007 or so, Games TM ran a feature on it and looked back at it and sort of conjectured that the game was a bit too ahead of its time. People weren't quite ready for the concept that it was offering. I remember enjoying this at the time though. I remember it being a cool idea. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a shame it didn't do better in arcades, but it did get a home port. Now, I don't have a packaged copy of the original release of Xybots, but I do have this compilation here called TNT from Domark, which collects together a bunch of Atari Games releases, including Xybots, and also Tubin, APB, Dragon Spirit, and Hard Driving. So some of the big name Atari Games releases at the time that were ported to home computers by Tengen and published by Domark. And so inside the box for TNT here, we've got Xybots. Comes on, I think, 2 discs actually. Yeah, here we are. So disc 3 and disc 4 of the compilation contain Dragon Spirit and Xybots, so you have to swap discs partway through. And there's not a lot else in there because that tended not to be. You tended not to get a lot of extras in compilation packages, but we do also have a manual. And so the Xybots section covers just 2 pages here, but let's have a quick look anyway. So Xybots is a game for 1 or 2 players who take on the characters of the heroes Major Rock Hardy and Captain Ace Gun. Your mission: to penetrate a vast underground complex and overcome the Master Xybot. The huge subterranean city is composed of convoluted mazes with locked doors barring entry to different sectors and transporters to connect different areas. Hordes of evil robotic monsters patrol the many corridors, and you must battle with these Xybots to reach the exit elevator and so advance to the next level. And so on. So it gives you a bit of information about how to play the game, how it's laid out, how to load it, that sort of thing. Yeah, you can play this 2-player as well. This was a split screen game, so you could play this with 2 people simultaneously if you wanted to. Player 1 could use the keyboard or the joystick, and player 2 had to use the joystick. So there was no sort of cramming 2 people onto one keyboard. So we also got some hints as well. Always be on the lookout for the coins that scatter throughout the game. They give you more purchasing power when you visit the shop at the end of each level, allowing you to obtain more sophisticated weaponry. Yeah, it's not not sort of rocket science really, is it? The other tips are: collect coins to buy new weapons, which is already said, keep an eye on your map, buy wisely, and keep shooting. So yeah, deep strategy involved in this game. Anyway, like I say, I did used to enjoy this game quite a lot, so I'm looking forward to revisiting it. So, let's go play Xybots. Okay, here we are with Xybots. The Xybots have invaded this once peaceful planet. Their underground fortress is guarded by robots controlled by Master Xybots. Major Rock Hardy and ace gun, whatever. Kill everything. Right, here we go. So, this is a simultaneous 2-player game. So you can play it split screen with a friend if you want to. Or you can play it by yourself. In which case you get that tiny window down the corner. So, where you control this is... It's a bit like a sort of dungeon crawler. So, rather than be from first person perspective though, you are playing from third person perspective. So, you move your dude around with the joystick. And you move forwards and backwards to go forwards and backwards, obviously. And then to go around a corner, you walk off the side of the screen like that, and that will turn you sideways. Or will it? No, that just makes you... There we go. So you hold down the fire button and push left or right to turn sideways. Walking off the side just makes you sidestep, basically. Okay, so at this point here, we found a key. So I can use that to open the door there. And that hole there will actually take us to a much later level. It's much more difficult. I'm going to skip that for now because I haven't played this for a long time and I'm probably very bad at it. So let's just go straight to level 2. Entering the shop. Right, let's take slow energy loss and a guard mapper. So that should show us on the map where enemies are. And also make our energy drop down a little bit more slowly. So one thing you might notice, which is a connection to Gauntlet, because this was originally intended to be a Gauntlet sequel, remember, is the fact that as you play, your energy is gradually draining regardless of you doing anything. Which is annoying, but it's how Atari kept you feeding credits into the machine. Fortunately, when you're playing the home port, you have no such worries because you have... Well, you don't have infinite credits in this, but you do have a stock of 9 credits to begin with. But you'll get through them pretty quickly. I mean, there are ways to restore your energy. And more importantly, there are ways to avoid losing too much energy, i.e. not getting shot. But it's still one relic of this particular era of Atari games that I really don't like. What is this? Oh, that restores our energy to full. That's good. Okay, so that's how that works. Right, we've destroyed everything on that level. Is there anything here? No, there is not. So we'll continue on to level 3. We've got 5 coins this time. Ooh, energy limit up. That'll do. So, yeah, that should mean that we can sort of last a bit longer generally now, presumably. Ow. Well, that looks like a power-up. What does this do? Oh, I think I'm accidentally setting off like a super weapon. You have like a zapper thing, I think. That's like a smart bomb. And I think if you pull back and fire... Yes, that sets that off. And that costs 10% of your energy. So don't do that accidentally. Yeah, that's kind of a sucky control decision. You do keep your power-ups if you continue, though. Stop shooting me. Yeah, that's really hard to not do accidentally if you're retreating from an enemy. Which kind of sucks. I guess you just got to be really careful. And make good use of sidestepping. And being prepared to deal with the different types of enemies. But yeah, that's really easy to lose health at an astronomical rate. Yeah, it sometimes makes me wonder how and why people put up with that horrible energy system in Gauntlet. Because not only was it a pain in the ass in the arcades, it also makes sort of the modern home ports kind of completely meaningless. Because you can just press a button to fill your energy up again. And that kind of means that there's no real sense of danger. I mean, you can't do that in this version, but like if you're emulating the arcade version of this, or if you're playing a modern port of Gauntlet in one of, say, like the Midway Arcade Treasures pack on consoles, you just have an add energy button on that, and it kind of means you can't die. Unless you deliberately restrict yourself. Which, yeah, you might have the willpower to do, but not everyone does. Let's have an energy pod. And a key, why not? Okay, on to level 4. Yeah, it's important to keep an eye on that radar at the top, I think. Just so you can sort of plan your routes and plan out if it is safe to just walk around a corner, or if you need to sidestep around it, or that kind of thing. Yeah, so it's an interesting game. There's just sort of certain aspects of its execution I kind of question a bit. What does this do? Oh, that teleports us somewhere else. Somewhere where we can be shot at and killed. Wonderful. Right. Let's try that again. Yeah, so I can sort of understand why this would be considered ahead of its time, and that might be why it didn't do that well in the arcades. Because if you think about sort of modern control schemes, they're much better suited to this kind of game now. So like a twin stick setup would be ideal for this. Or even just a single stick setup with triggers. Triggers for turning left and right. But yeah, having everything on one stick and one button, like we've got in this version, yeah, it's not the best. I mean, it's not awful. And like I say, I do remember enjoying this game back in the day. But I think a lot of that was because I hadn't really played anything like it before. Like I wasn't into RPGs at the time. I wasn't into dungeon crawlers, so I hadn't played Dungeon Master. I hadn't played, what were some other ones? Like Blood Witch and the Dungeons and Dragons games and that sort of thing. I hadn't played any of those, so I wasn't really familiar with this sort of perspective and navigating through a game world in this way. Oh! See, that's why the energy system sucks, because I just died then. I didn't do anything. It was just because I took slightly too long. Oh well. It actually feels like it's draining faster than it was in the early levels as well, so... If that is indeed how it works, then Atari games, you suck. Like it's kind of the equivalent of the energy systems we have in mobile games these days. So it's a method to artificially limit the amount of time that you can play. See there, that's ridiculous. Alright, well let's see if we can clear this level. We've only got 2 credits left. But yeah, in terms of how accurate this conversion was, having played the arcade version as well, this is actually pretty solid port. So I mean, obviously there's some elements where it's not quite as good, so the sound in particular, because as we've established pretty well on this series by this point, the Atari ST sound chip was kind of sucky. And graphically I think it doesn't have quite as many colours, but certainly it's a pretty convincing recreation of the overall aesthetic of the arcade game, certainly. But yeah, just these slightly... Oops, that's not what I meant to do. Yeah, just these slightly sluggish controls, they kind of hurt it a bit. Particularly those turning controls. Like if you could turn a little bit more easily... Right there, I turned through 180 degrees without intending to. I was just trying to shoot. And again. Yeah, it just slightly feels like the game can't quite keep up with the controls. That might just purely be a frame rate thing. But yeah, it just means that it's sort of a solid concept that doesn't quite work in execution. But those are always interesting games to look at. So like I say, I'm glad I revisited this one. As while it may not hold up brilliantly today, it's certainly a valiant effort to do something a bit different at the time. And worth acknowledging for that. Turn. Where's the energy pod? There it is. Oh, God. Well, anyway, that's the end of our time with Xybots then, I guess. So, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue a small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.